Being served. Oops, let me do this. All right. Well, good morning again, everybody. I will do my usual thing here. I'll talk for maybe 20 minutes and then we'll have a conversation. So what I'm going to start with today is something most of you have heard me use a number of times. Nisargadatta Maharaj at one point said to somebody who was asking him a question, when you were a child, when you were born, your mother said to you, you were a boy. It was actually to somebody who saw themselves as a man, so he said this to them. Your mother told you you were a boy, and you believed her. And then she told you your name was Shariputra, and you believed her. And you've been believing that ever since. So I'm going to explore that. The purpose being to recognize some of the intensity and ferociousness with which we create our stories, quite how sticky these stories are, and how ridiculous they are, and how much suffering they cause us. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about, so what can we do about that? How can we use this to help ourselves reduce our suffering? This came to me because Beth, my wife Beth, she sent me a link a few weeks ago to some 5 or 6 year old Radio Lab podcasts, which are about gonads. Now, gonads is a bad word, it's about the male parts, but it's not. It's just a neutral word. It means the reproductive organs. It's the testes and the ovaries. That's what gonads are. So the person who put this together intentionally said she is reclaiming that word. But it's about gonads, and so there's this whole series of things about gender in people, gender and sexual manifestation, how all that works. So there's like 6 of these, I think, and I just got through the 3rd one yesterday, and it's wow. So at some point, I mean, genes first started to be observed maybe 150 years ago, and then Crick and Watson did their thing and got Nobel Prizes maybe 70 years ago, something like that, where they got the double spiral thing going. So however you cut it, this is relatively recent knowledge we're talking about here. So somewhere in this past, we came up with an X and a Y chromosome. It's like, oh, that's cool. So if somebody has 2 X chromosomes, they're female. If they have an X and a Y, they're male. Great, done. Check that one off and move on. And then there were some anomalies started showing up. There were people with 2 X chromosomes who were male. People with an X and a Y chromosome who were female. It didn't make any sense. And then the scientists, as they're called, which it's just a big old punt as far as I'm concerned, because it's somebody, not me, we'll give them a group name. The scientists said, well, there's actually what's going on here, this is not a chromosome, this is a gene. Tiny little thing. Hundreds of genes, maybe 1,000 genes on some of these chromosomes. This is a particular gene which is called the SORY gene, SRY. I can remember that one, the SORY gene. The SRY gene is actually what determines masculinity or femininity. So that one normally hangs out on the Y chromosome. So you've got this gene on the Y chromosome that makes you male. But sometimes it shows up on the X chromosome. So it's actually more complicated. But this was all background to the real point of the story. And the real point of the story was, even with that, it still doesn't work. It's still not true. And the particular thrust of this story was some scientists, and there I go, using the collective name for a bunch of people I don't know to just push it out there somewhere. It was, there's experiments performed where a particular gene, and I have a way of remembering this acronym too, DMRT1. DMRT1 was turned off, because what normally happens is this sorry gene gets turned on, and there's this cascade that has several generations of turning on a whole bunch of genes and doing a whole bunch of stuff in here to cause all the things that determine the presentation of this body sexually to happen. And then once they've done their thing, they all turn off. But this thing called the DMRT seemed to have some implication in the sexual system, and it was still switched on. So there were some experiments done where it was turned off. I don't know how you turn off a gene in the body. I mean, it's like all over the place. So how do you do it? I have no idea, but that's what they said. So you turn this off, and what happened is the system went nuts. The sperm started losing its tail. The testes were trying to turn into ovaries, and ovaries were trying to turn into testes, and I had no idea what was going on. And there are previous podcasts where there are other utterly bizarre stories. So somebody had cancer, a woman had cancer, really bad cancer. She wanted to have children. She was probably going to die after having treatment for this cancer, but she said, I don't care, I'm going to have children, take out one of my ovaries and freeze it. So they did. All experimental science. So they said, okay, we'll freeze it. We can do that. We know we can wake it back up again, but we have no idea what we'll do with it then. So they cut slices out of it, stuck it in her skin. She got pregnant 3 times. She's got 3 kids. Nobody knows how that happened. Whether it activated old dead ovaries or whether eggs started moving. Nobody knows what happened. Bizarre. So we don't know. So then the conversation moved to the blue-headed wrasse, which some of you may have seen David Attenborough films on this. He's done movies on this. The blue-headed wrasse is a rather spectacular fish, and there's one male which has got black and white stripes on his head, and you've got a whole harem around it, and it seems to spend most days just going up in a spiral with one of the girls at a time, and they just shout eggs and semen, and then they go off, and then the next one, and they go off and duplicate. So if something happens to this male, what does the harem do? Well, actually what happens, somehow or other, they all know who this will be, and the biggest female turns into a male. So you've got these little genes that are doing this flipping thing. It's just extraordinary. We have no idea. I'm just getting into the part of the story where they start talking about, I don't know how much they'll get into the science. Of course, this is really bad science I'm doing right now. It's very much superficial stuff, but the results are there. And there are people who physically manifest, hermaphroditically. And this has been known for a long while. So how do you fit this in a binary system? And we have people who hormonally and in other ways show up in non-binary ways. I mean, this is just part. But you were told you were a girl, and you were a girl, and you were a boy, and you believed it. And we're still believing this nonsense. These are such rigid stories, and we take them to be so, so true. I don't have my wallet with me. If I did at this point, I'd do something I've done before. I'd pull out a dollar bill and say, what is this? Well, if you showed up with a dollar bill in the UK, it wouldn't be much use. It's money because we have agreed it's money, right? So I'm jumping right now. So let me go somewhere else. So there's another story I want to tell you, which you all know. Schrödinger's cat. Famous experiment, thought experiment. So you get this little jar of poisonous gas, and you get this little lump of nuclear fissible material, and it's got a half-life of a relatively short period of time. So if it degrades, it will break the jar open, the poisonous gas comes out, and the cat that's in this container will die. Well, this thought experiment was probably done in the day where you'd have a small box and the cat would be in there. So let's expand the box, maybe give it a playmate, maybe give it one of those catnip toys in there. So it's a happy cat in this box, okay? But at some point, half-life, so after 2 hours, there's a 50% chance it's alive, a 50% chance it's dead. From outside the box, there is no way of knowing. There's no way of knowing. And in fact, from outside the box, there are superimposed states. It's not just there's no way of knowing, it hasn't been defined. And when we open the box and look, the whole situation is crystallized and it's defined. So now we go to money. Because I was thinking this just now. The money is... this is an example of how we create reality. I mean, this gender stuff I was just talking about, we have created a reality, and the more we land on nouns and adjectives and legal systems wrapped around it and expectations, the more we build a concrete reality. If we think of money, it's complicated and interwoven, but in many ways it's a simpler one to get our mind around. We have built a story around what money is. I mean, we live on this land. Somebody owns this piece of land that this building is built on. If you slow down and you think about it, that can make absolutely no sense. How can an ant own a mountain when the mountain is moving? It makes no sense. And yet we believe this, and we base our daily activities on this. Money is the same. Money comes into existence because we think it means something. We agree it means something. And so we've changed the whole shape of the world we live in to wrap money around it, to wrap it around money. It's just, money is everywhere. So we're so tied up on, do I have enough money for when I retire? How much am I going to earn this year? How much does this cost? Money is so deeply interwoven. It's been with humankind for a long time now, but it's become much more intense. It's not been there forever. It's a relatively short part of our history, and it's become so much more intense. A complexity of money is that it's a social agreement. It's a social construct, right? So I have my daydreams, my dreams, and those become my reality. Money is our reality. But the separation between us, logically we all know that's something we make up too. So that we do it together doesn't mean anything other than, it doesn't change it being a created system. So money is a really good example of how we literally create our world. If you think of our world, how much time do you spend on your computer looking at your bank account or your investments or balancing a checkbook or all these kind of things? This is your world. This is my world. This is the world we live in. We have created this. Literally created it. Literally dreamed it into being and made it our reality. This is what we do all the time. And all of our suffering comes from building stories like money, like ownership of land, like I'm a boy. That was what was that? That was the Who, wasn't it? I'm a boy. Thank you, Tommy. Yeah. So all of our suffering comes from building these stories and believing these stories and getting stuck on these stories. So what do we do with this? Well, the first thing we do is to slow down enough to see the stories. There's a wonderful book that I haven't read in a decade by David Loy, he's a Zen Buddhist teacher, and it's called something like All the World is Stories. And it's just a little book. It's very readable, as I remember, but it's a lovely little book which makes precisely this point. The first thing we have to do is slow down and see that everything, literally everything, is a story. Everything that we bring into awareness up here is a story. Until we open the door and we look at that cat, it's a possibility. When we look at that cat, it becomes a reality, it becomes a story. So literally everything is a story. And once we see that, we can start to let go of what we think of as a concrete reality of this story. And we can start, so it's letting go of the stories that we have created to start with. And that's an exercise. We sit on the cushions. One of the things that happens is we settle down, and it's this balance of calming and insight, calming and insight. So things slow down a little bit, we can start to see things more clearly. And as we start to see things more clearly, that's our opportunity to start to see the storiness of the world we live in. Because when things calm down, we're sitting there looking at our life and see the story nature of it. And as we start to see that story nature, it starts to loosen up. And as it loosens up, we can settle down a little more, see a layer deeper. So there's this virtuous cycle of unpacking our world as we go into our practice. Second thing we can do is, as we wander around in the world, we bump into stress all the time, right? And it's our stress. I mean, we bump into things that make us anxious. And it's, recognize when that happens, try and see what the story is that's causing this suffering. Try and see what the story is. Some of you know I've spent some time with Al-Anon recently, and so that's, one of the things with Al-Anon is they say, first, well, it's AA as well, first thing is, I'm not in control. I can't control this situation. That's an outgrowth of seeing the story as story. Seeing it as story. I can't control the outcome of the story. I just can't. So you've got to let go of this. So in our world as we move around, when stress or suffering starts to show up, slowing down and trying to see the story that is causing this suffering. Third thing to do is stop making stories. Realize that this is our tendency, and as we go through life, our lives, most people as they go through life, they're in this culture anyway, their lives kind of narrow in because they become more and more specialist, more and more landed in the place they live, the livelihood they have, their family, whatever it is. So our lives tend to close in a little bit. That's generally a trend. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can open it up. We can intentionally open up our lives. We can intentionally spot how we're creating these more closed stories and narrowing out the trajectory of our life, and just intentionally open it up. Do stupid things. Do crazy things. So one of the things we can do is, if we recognize the power of story over us, it's to stop creating stories. Now there's another piece of this, which is, having said all of this about stopping stories, once we start doing this, we can recognize stories are fun. Stories are great. So this isn't a manifesto for a nihilistic life. This is a manifesto for, okay, once we've let go of all the stories, now we can recognize we are actors. We are just actors in this wonderful play that is my life. Everybody's life. The universe's life. I'm just an actor, a bit player for a short period of time. I come and I get to have just a blast. And a lot of that having a blast is being in connection with beautiful people. And hopefully, just a little bit helping beautiful people along the way, being kind, being nice. And it's by letting go of our stories, by recognizing the density of these stories, and our identities is just such a dense story. We've been spending our whole lives with so much energy building this. Letting go of those stories opens us up ultimately to letting the stories arise as just fun, as just something we don't have to hold on to and we don't want to hold on to. It's a beautiful expression of this wonderful thing we call life. So that's what I have for you today. What does that bring up for people? Anand.
Yeah. So without stories it will be boring, right? Life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was thinking, actually there is not wrong with story, but taking it attached to it is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the story itself is not the problem. I was thinking when I was coming here about all the religions, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the religions, they were initially created, maybe it was a good thing for wherever someone here created one religion, someone here created based on whatever they saw, whatever their understanding. So the construct to help to realize the realize the God or Buddha nature or Krishna consciousness or whatever, right? So that story, um, I think we took too much seriously and um, fighting with each other,
Right.
right? So the problem is taking that. I see too much attached to it, like to the death.
Right.
That's what our ignorance. So I think I like the let go of the story is the so is we need to just deconstruct. Okay, so the money we need it, right? So to operate in the world with this 6 billion, 7 billion, whatever the population, to coexist and transact with each other and all of that. So we cannot just live without money. We cannot just let it. I mean, I'm not saying let it go, but the attachment to it. Right? That's what I see a serious problem. Thank you.
So I would argue we could live without money actually.
Yeah, I mean.
The world, but it's
That's not my point,
it's a
right?
social construct. So this is enmeshed in that story. But I don't have to be entangled with it. I mean, it's don't have to be entangled with it in the same way that the world at large is. So it's quite possible. Because the other part of it is we need money to live. Well, this is a story too. I mean, I'm making all of this up, and if you know. So so the other part of that. So yes, we need money. The caution with that though is taking this as a story too seriously, which is part of the point I'm getting at with the whole identity thing that I began with, because this is the story that we take so seriously, and this is the one we really have to work to get rid of. That this is real, because it's just not. It can't. The idea of it owning anything is ridiculous. The other piece of it that I want to come to though, Anand, is not all stories have equal value. There are some really dangerous stories. So what happens when we deconstruct stories, and then we allow story to emerge from that place of not hanging on to them, we can let the fun stories, the light stories, the friendly stories, the helpful stories be the ones that we live into. And there are a whole bunch of stories that we just don't need to let arise. So there's a level of discrimination or discernment on these stories. So Bruce, and then one of you guys, I forget which one it was. Oh no, it's Amit, sorry. So Bruce and then Amit.
Yeah.
And then Rosemary after that.
There are two aspects of what you're talking about. One is the what I'll call the received stories
Mm-hmm.
that we get from others, external, what society is kind of telling us, what we learn in school,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of story. And that's one thing. The other thing is the stories that are internally generated.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about that recently because I tend to generate stories around conflict.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, if there's something that's bothering me, I make up a story about it. And so those kind of stories are, in a sense, easier to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have to fight this whole universal structure of what society is telling us. And it's actually been quite helpful, first of all, just to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's the place you start.
That's where you start. But I had an incident this last week where a woman I had met, and we sort of become friends at the gym, and we went out to lunch, had a great lunch. We have a lot in common, and the next day I get this text from her saying, I no longer want to pursue our friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had some choices. I could have made up all sorts of stories about that.
Mm-hmm.
Was it something I did? what's going on with her, anything. And amazingly to myself, I didn't really try to make up any stories about it. It's just that's the way it is,
Yeah.
and dropped it, and and moving on. Uh, but most of the time, I'm not able to do that. But it felt so much better just to be able to say, okay, no stories about this. I don't have to know why.
Yep.
It's just I don't have to make up anything. But I'm still struggling with some of these other stories. I tell myself.
Well, this whole thing, this story is a difficult one, and the boundary the separation you're talking about between inside and outside stories, we experience as very real, so long as we have a boundary between inside and outside. And a lot of our practice, ultimately, the end of our practice is getting rid of that boundary. Because the inside stories we create are all stories that come out of what has fed into creating this identity, what's inside this sack of skin and bones. So in a very real sense, all of those inside stories arise from outside influence. Right? All of them.
I'm sure, yeah.
So that, yes, I get the point about what's inside is easier, but it ultimately it all comes from this story that there is a me that's separate from everything else, and that is a story. That's the origin story. You're a boy, and your name is Bruce, and you believed it from the get-go. Amit.
So all of this talk about stories reminds me of a story.
Absolutely wonderful, as it should.
So then a person is sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
and they're having a dream, and in that dream they are in a jail, and they are trying very hard. They're struggling to cut their chains or cut the bars of that cell, and they're trying very, very hard to come out of that jail. But all they really have to do is just wake up from
Exactly.
their dream or their sleep.
It's a lovely story.
So I think that's what we do on a daily basis, is that we are struggling with things which are just concepts and stories basically, and all we have to really do is realize and identify them as stories and not get attached with them.
And the Buddha, of course, said, this is a dream. The life we live is a dream. And what I've been saying is exactly, I've not used those words, which are lovely words, is what the Buddha taught was, we just got to wake up. We just got to wake up and see what this really is. So, thank you. That was lovely. Rosemary.
Well, I'm on, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, I have some heretical things to say.
Of course you do.
Right. Well, one thing, this is not really what I wanted to say, but I think you can make judgments about things. Buddha did, no, that's wrong. Or Dalai Lama says, no, you're too attached to that. No, you are a worthy person. But then you make a judgment, like that email was hateful and evil, even, I don't know. But you don't cling to it, you move on. So but my story, what about this? I think some stories are great and just give me life, and I am so attached to them. And I'm a real sufferer. Like I suffer, I think, 62% of my life in the past, maybe 71. But I have this story that of Dvorak, of many things. But I have the story of this Dvorak music being so beautiful, like Dappled Sun. And I'm going to a concert this afternoon, and I sprung for orchestra seats because that was what was left. And I know that every time I hear Dvorak, it just brings me joy and love, and I love the players. And I'm so thankful for all the time they had to practice and they couldn't go out and play baseball or whatever. But I hold on to that. I cling to that, and it's just, and it all has to do with time too, which of course I don't understand, but it like time makes that possible because you couldn't have music without time. And so I don't know if they count as stories, but it sounds like they're stories. So what about beautiful stories? Or do you call them something else? Do you call them poetry and they're not prose? It's only prose stories?
So I'm going to give you answers to two things there. Thing one, um, you said the Buddha judged and so forth, and
Yeah,
well,
he
there
was.
is there's an important distinction there.
I'm not the Buddha. I know that.
There's a really important distinction because yes, and there are people who will tell you that we should not judge. Well, we should not judge people. We should not judge things. We should not judge anything. I have double vision. I see only my own faults. I do not see the faults of others. But we use judgment when we see things happening to decide if that was skillful or not. And we use that to help ourselves in our own lives and our own practice. If we see something happening out there that is useful and skillful from the standpoint it results in a reduction of suffering, that's great. That's a good thing to learn from. Let's bring that in. Let's learn from that and use it. If it's not skillful, we don't. So judgment, discernment is really important, but in a very specific way. The point you're making about the story of music, yeah, and this is the conversation that the direction Anand took it in, which is we let go of so undo all of our stories, which allows us to then move into the beautiful stories and enjoy this incarnation, this life. The most wonderful part of this life is relationship and relationship around reducing suffering. So when I'm in this sack of skin and bones and I'm just a me, then it is really lovely to go to a concert and listen to Dvorak or Beethoven or whoever, right? I mean, I've had some wonderful times doing that. I find it even more wonderful when I'm actually, when I've been playing the piano for a while and I actually sit down and do it myself, right? I can't do that now because I've not played for so long. But it is, it's wonderful to play music yourself. That brings even more. But the push here is to recognize that any sensual pleasure is a limited pleasure. And we can develop more and more subtle sensual pleasures, but they're still sensual pleasures. They are still limited, they're time bound, and they are limited. The more subtle pleasures, the peace of God which passeth all understanding, isn't a limited pleasure. So if we let go of all of the stories and we come back and just allow the stories to show up and we can recognize the fullness of the stories and there's no me there, and I mean just be in this wonderful place where there's no me in this place. There's just moving into the suffering and helping with suffering. That is so much. I mean, yes, Rosemary, that's beautiful, and it's a lot better than so many of the pleasures. Like there's a bunch of people who are going to go around. I think today is that big oval ball game. I don't even know who's playing, but there's a big day in America, right?
Chicken wings.
And I mean, I don't know how that thing works, but a lot of people are going to get drunk and do stupid things and make a lot of noise, and there's probably going to be people drive into walls afterwards. It's just going to be a mess. And some people are going to have fun, but it's going to be a very boorish and brash, clumsy kind of fun. But that is, within that realm of that story, that is a fun thing to do. What you're talking about is a more subtle pleasure. There are yet more subtle pleasures and more subtle pleasures. So as we release ourselves from the stories, we don't pick sides in this Sunday afternoon fiasco. We just, like, it's just people having fun, right? It's a totally different relationship with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's why I'm a heretic, because I think the truth of God passes all understanding, and Dvorak is real, and that is, maybe you can throw me out of the Sangha.
No. It's an important conversation.
But that's a gift of, I don't know, the universe that,
That's the point, though, Rosemary. It's a gift
yeah,
of the universe. It's a gift of the universe.
it's a gift of the universe, and it passes because time passes, even though time doesn't exist. But I don't know. It's it maybe it's transcendence.
And music can take us to that place. But when that happens, Rosemary, then there is no time when it's transcendent. Anyway, let's move on and see what's
Okay.
something else.
Get away from heretics.
No, give heretics not the whole floor. Let somebody else have the floor for a while. That's all. Thank you, Hannah. I'm sorry, Karen.
That's okay. What Rosemary brought up sort of brought my mind to the idea that some stories open us up, you know, make us more joyous, allow us to thrive, and other stories sort of shut us down, you know, because we have to believe a particular story. So whether we let go of all stories or not, you know, I think if we can acknowledge, you know, the story that I'm in right now, is this going to leave me open to a certain level of curiosity and openness for possibly even a new ending? Like, what are they going to play next, you know? But if we have a story that closes us down and we've already predicted what the next chapter is and the subsequent one and what the ending has to be, you know, to prove the story that we're holding on to, then that story has kind of limited us. So, you know, whether we're successful at letting go of stories altogether or not, I think that distinction can be very helpful, because it's the curiosity, you know, the life, the joy, those things I think do bring us closer to the divine. What was the line that you said about God and passeth away?
Oh, the peace of God which passeth all understanding.
I have to bookmark that one. But I think when we're open and thriving, we grow a little bit closer, you know, because we're, you know, releasing ourselves into something that is bigger than the story of who
Yes.
we are and our individual identities. So I'm glad that Rosemary brought that up.
I am too, and the gloss you put on it was a lovely one, Karen, which is I think this is actually what you're pointing at in your story, Rosemary. It's stories that open us up into something bigger. And as long as the direction of our stories is that direction, they're wonderful stories.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not a heretic, Rosemary, any more than anyone here is a heretic.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, maybe you are. I'll let you have that one.
Well, that's her story.
That's right. I'll let you have that one.
And she's sticking to it.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Katie had her hand up before, I
Kate? No?
she did a minute ago.
Oh, Kaylee. I think you said Katie. I'm
No,
sorry.
Kaylee.
Kaylee, did you have something?
I was gonna mention, which I think, or the question I had was pretty much already answered. I can't see who was telling the story before. Excuse me. But I was gonna say again, my one of my favorite koans, the before enlightenment or before Zen, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers, and learning Zen, they were no longer mountains and rivers, and then after enlightenment they were again mountains, and mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. And I was thinking, I guess I had this vision in my mind that you had to completely go through that process of no mountains were mountains and no rivers were rivers before you could reach that other side. But with this story narrative, like Bruce was saying, there are some stories that are easy to let go and others that are harder to let go. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to let go of all of them. But it's still helpful to allow myself to let go of some of them and discern which ones are helpful. And I also wanted to say, I think we can get caught in this idea. We can get caught in the story of stories that, I have a tendency of overthinking things. And I think that the conversation was slipping into that, that being overly attached to this idea that attached to emptiness, basically.
Yes.
The emptiness of story.
It's a very good caution, Kaylee. Thank you. Yeah, it's very easy to find the new story of what's going on, and then that becomes what we hang on to. And you're absolutely right. Anand.
Actually, Kaylee brought something. So yeah, that's great. There is a mountain, there is another mountain, and there is a mountain again. Basically, there is a story, there is no story, and there is a story again, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, something I just thought of saying if I forgot already. All right, never mind.
Okay. So the man, I'll clarify something. In the classic description of this, what that represents is, in the beginning there's a mountain, which is this concrete object, right?
Black and white.
Right. Then there is no mountain, which is when we start to, when we really experience the emptiness of things, when we let go of all of our stories, there's nothing there. There's no thing. And then there is a mountain, only it's not the same mountain. It's not a story at that point. It's not the same mountain because there's an arising. It's not a story at that point. It's beautiful. It's hard to. You can't describe it in words. But I wanted to go back to what Kaylee said, because you were saying whether you have to do all of that. There are different ways of approaching the story of enlightenment, right? And there's a classic way of looking at it where suddenly everything drops away and then there's nothing. But it doesn't have to work that way. It doesn't have to work that way, which was your point, Kaylee. This is something where most of us go stepwise and incrementally, and life just becomes every day, maybe if things are headed in the right direction. We'll have days which go the other way, but the general direction is life just becomes looser, more open, happier, less stuck. And that's what this journey is about. Did you remember, Anand?
Yeah, the thing I was remembering was Buddha said even having a view is something I don't remember exactly the wording, but not having a view also a view, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you say that there are no stories, or that is also a view,
Mm-hmm.
right? That also can be a wrong.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to
Yes.
mention. Like, we cannot really say that there are no stories, but it's again a view. So it becomes a view because we are attached to it. When you are attached, like there is no story, then again you are in that trap.
So avoiding the traps.
Yes.
We are about at time, so let's go to our let's save some beings. Same chant card in your windows. Oops, I was about to start in completely the wrong place. That's why I was confused. It didn't make any sense. Beings are numberless, I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. So Bruce, I've left you 2 minutes to do the announcement. So get your skates on,
I'll
buddy.
make it. First, I want to apologize to our Zoom participants. I could not get the Zoom program to load. I would have had to reboot the computer, so I'll do better next week. Sorry. Okay, we're going to run through these fairly quickly today. Regular activities. This evening is mindful practice in the Plum Village tradition. On Tuesday is Tai Chi with Marcus. Wednesday is the reading group on Zoom. Thursday is Gareth's evening practice, 7:30. Next Sunday we will have a precepts renewal session, followed by a potluck at 11:30. And a new event, Sangha Community Service Planning Call, will be, which you can find out more on the website, will be on Sunday evening, February 19th. That's next Sunday evening. Retreats. The feminine face of Buddhism is a one-day retreat with Charlie on February 17th. Mind with a View is our name of the 5-day retreat that we're doing up in Eastern Tennessee with Gareth as the teacher. It's a 5-day retreat. Let's see, we've already covered that. There'll be a half-day practice with Richard practicing with the mantra on February 24th, and then this will be the second in the series of Dharma study sessions, Understanding the Dhamma Sutra with Gareth on March the 2nd, and our annual members meeting will be on Sunday, March the 10th, following the service. So I hope everyone will be able to stay for that. Then, looking way down the road, there will be another precept ceremony in July. I'm not sure the date. And if you're interested in taking the precepts, see Gareth. And again, this is all on the website. So if you want more particulars, please go there.
Thank you, Bruce.
I think that's it.
Chad has something for us for today.
Yay! After lunch, I'm coming back to spend an hour stuffing cushions, and anybody who wants to come join us is more than welcome to pound K-Pock into these little things that sit under our butts, or our butts sit on. One of those.
One of those. So do, if you can, come back and help Chad do that. The that phone call, the community thing, I think that's a Monday, not a Sunday, but that's on the website, so
I'm
check
sorry.
it. Doesn't matter. I think that's Monday the 19th. I think Sunday would be the 18th, but could be wrong. Doesn't
You're
matter.
right, you're right.
Check the website. Thank you. Lunch. I'm just looking at your, being enormously grateful for your presence, your beauty, for your practice. It's just wonderful to be with everybody. Thank you for being here. It's just lovely to see everybody. And Zoom as well. Thank you all very much. Lunch. How many people are going to lunch?